Hey folks, it's Brian. We got to play Elderath tonight, and it's day 8 of week 5 of Alor, which is the first month of spring, the second month of the year. We've been using spell lists to try to communicate with sea creatures and such, and so Raymond uses this to talk with some manta rays that have come by, and they mention that, he just doesn't look right. In fact, he doesn't even smell right. He doesn't have the artifacts of authority. And he mentions that we're trying to use these sea creatures to spy on the Kuatua, and when they talks about the fishmen, he actually mentioned Forg. That got them all wiry at the end, and they talked about the evil, corrupted mermen out there and that kind of stuff. Back inside, Raymond suggests, because we're talking about different things we can do, and one of them is about summoning creatures, and he mentions, summoning is more of an essence thing than a channeling thing, so maybe Wes should do something. And so Wes goes to the west building, which is the mage's training area. He attempts to meditate on the issue and is attempting to make some kind of connection with the temple, similar to what Raymond has been doing, but in the realm of essence, but he doesn't get anything. Further discussions ensue, and they decide to do some divination kind of stuff, and the priestess casts the dream spell. The next day, she explains to us, oh shoot, I'm off by a day. She explains to us that her dream was rather confusing. There was a sword, there was armor, and there was a third non-gender specific kind of something. So we figured out, okay, the sword and armor, probably the sword and armor that Runt has. And so we talked to Runt about his capacity for devotion and his options for a Loranthian dedication. Not just now, but in the future as well, right? So Raymond and Runt go back to the portal where they've been talking with the fishes. And Runt is in his full gear, so he's got the manta ray armor, and he's got the manta ray swords. But the manta rays are not impressed, and they say, "It is not the one." Raymond decides to try casting Summons 5. He's looking for specifically for a shark at first, but the spell allows him to use certain options to extend the length of the spell, which he does. He's actually successful in getting a small octopus or squid, and what he's trying to get them to do is to go to the library and bring back something, a book or a scroll or a tablet. And this creature does not know of such a place. Lots of books, lots of scrolls, lots of tablets. But he will go and look. After the spell expires, this creature still has not come back. So that night, Runt attempts to contact the Avatar himself. He is not successful. He then starts looking... Raymond attempts, not Runt. Raymond attempts to contact Avatar, not successful. So he starts looking into his connection he has with the temple. It's being described to us as levers and stuff. That what effect is keeping the air bubble here? And to see if he can then extend that air bubble out. He finds the effect, and he notices, though, that is only just a minimal amount. Which is what encompasses the larger temple area. And there's a lot more space available for it to move forward, but he cannot seem to move forward. Raymond mentions that it appears that something is broken. And when Raymond says broken, Wes had a similar feeling, specifically with that word broken, at the temple. While he was trying to use the mage's training grounds when he was training, trying to see if he could, use the temple to increase his training capacity. So we all gather around the temple proper in the oracle area. Um, Beyond the obvious that the building itself is destroyed, we do notice that the Sylvanus statue is very different from what Hjalmar is used to, um, and that the Maliki deity of the pantheon, which is wild nature, pure and unspoiled, is missing. The temple is a dedicated space. You can perform services here and stuff because we're thinking, well, maybe it's desecrated. We need to reconsecrate that kind of thing. Just trying to figure stuff out. Raymond figures out that there is a possible way for him to communicate in an emergency, hopefully with people down in cars. He didn't go into details about it, but he thinks he has an idea. He starts to clean up the math shrine, but he notices that it does not look like math. It's in the right place in the pantheon. The iconography, there we go, is right, but the shrine itself is different. You know, all the shrines, as he starts to think about it, they all have this elven type taint to them. They don't look human. They look elvish. Now we get together with Krim and we discuss, defensive options in case we're attacked, because we know something's going to happen before anybody else shows up. Let's take a look around the temple area for the about how much fallen stone is there here. Is all the stone from the roof here on the ground somewhere? And it looks like, yeah, there's probably plenty of stone here to repair the roof if we had the manpower and the skill to do so. The area around the temple proper and the altar. Oh, and you can see that picture in Albert Rodeo in the live play, which, by the way, is in the description. And there's a lot of... Up front, there's a bunch of, I think, game mechanic discussions. I don't remember now how much it was, but some of that stuff happens. Okay, so... Also, the north and south chambers and the west building had stairs in them, so there's at least a second story to each of those. So if we were trying to reconstruct this, it would take a long time. Lots of space here. Okay, Runt speaks with the priestess about initiating into Loranth, and his fear of Heta. The fact that he knows that Heta wants to be the head spy assassin person. And Runt's kind of thinking that if he does this initiation thing, he'll become the head spy assassin person, and he's afraid Heta will kill him to take his place. They then talk to Raymond about this. After further discussion, Raymond agrees to pursue this initiation, or there's another word I come across later, process. The priestess and Raymond then talk privately about this whole thing and about, is Runt really ready and all this kind of stuff. But after all the discussions, it's decided Runt is going to go through with this. So we're all invited to his induction, that was the other word, into Lorath's care. Raymond initiates the process, and the priestess then takes over, and she's successful in doing so. And after all this is over, Raymond finds that there's now a candidate for one of the open temple positions. In fact, there are actually 3 possible candidates: Krim, the priestess, and Runt. After this ceremony, we'll all go our separate ways doing our own thing. And Raymond invests the priestess into a position and invests Runt into a position within this temple hierarchy. Raymond the priestess then have discussions about the temple and her new connection to it, and the elvishness of the shrines. The next day, Raymond then goes to speak with the Rays again. Sorry about that. I lost my place. Okay. Alright, so Raymond goes speak with the rays. Runt joins him, and Raymond casts his speak with animal spells, both on himself and Runt. He can now cast it on Runt because he's connected to the temple. It's a temple spell. The one of the rays actually talks to Runt specifically and says that he sees him, and they talk. Okay, Raymond goes around. After this is over, Raymond goes around talking with folks. He talks with Wes. He talks with Krim Hialmar about these, temple positions in the hierarchy that are open. Wes is hesitant. He does worship Celeste, and he's got, his devotion is actually, it's not his devotion, his piousness versus worldly. Because I use the Pendragon traits to give me a baseline of how this character acts, how I role play my character. And it's a 9 to 11, so it's in that average range. He's got 33% in his worship Celeste. I think that's about max that he would do with that kind of ratio. But he's got devotion to Celeste, right? Knowledge and something else. So he's concerned about it's not like I can just stop worshiping Celeste and I start worshiping Sylvanus, right? I mean, you don't just, some people, if you do a conversion, that would happen, right? But he's got this conflict going on. And they talk about faith and how one portrays their faith. I went too far. Oh. Raymond then speaks with the priestess about speaking to Wes. So she goes and speaks with Wes, and that's where this whole description of minimal devotion, that he's devoted to Celeste. He's only got a little bit of devotion, but it is to Celeste, right? And she mentions, they talk about faith and how one portrays their faith. And have you ever considered meditating on Celeste about this? And no, Wes hasn't. But hey, he will. And then she kind of mentions, Krim is devoted to Sylvanus. There may be implications between her and her devotion to Lorath and Wes. I did miss something here. It's not in my notes. I completely skipped over it. Okay, so after Raymond spoke, with Wes and Hjalmar about, and Wes is hesitant, about how do these relations really work, can they change, and that kind of thing. And Raymond discusses his interpretation about, if the king sends you to live under a different count's domain, there are no loyalty issues to your old count. And Wes kind of grasped onto that. But his interpretation was, your loyalty to the king and queen does not change no matter whose count or countess you serve. And at that point is, okay, so we can still have these multiple duplicate relationships. So that kind of goes by the wayside, but he's still concerned about these internal changes. I mean, he only has this little bit of devotion, and it is to Celeste. How does he go from there, kind of thing, right? And then Raymond goes to talk with Krim and Hjalmar. Krim is feeling all confused, and Hjalmar needs to address that cloud that's hanging over his soul with the whole Mad Eye incident. Okay. Back to where we were about this whole Lorath devotion with Krim and all this other stuff happened. Okay. So Raymond then senses creatures gathering at the periphery of his senses, specifically to the northeast and to the southwest. Raymond then gathers all of us up, and Runt goes off to talk with the manta rays about asking for help. There's one actually under the sand there at the end. He pops up. And he agrees to help fight the evil fishmen. And then Runt turns and runs off, and the manta ray swims away. And that's where we ended, because the next thing we know is going to be a battle with a bunch of Kuatua or evil fishmen. I guess Kuatua is probably a trademark term. I've not been thinking about that for my own personal use. Okay, and so that's where we ended the session. Very simple. A whole lot of role play going on back and forth. A whole lot with Raymond, because he's kind of the focal point of all the stuff that's happening right now. So it's just the way it is. Um, he did hand it off a couple times, at least once to Wes on trying to figure out, why is the temple broken. And of course, it all makes sense now that it's this temple hierarchy thing. So we'll see how things progress. Happy gaming.